Let's go Broncos! Something very important is happening behind the scenes in Denver right now, and most people still haven't realized how serious this situation could become for the future of the Broncos defense. One decision involving the safety room may completely change the direction of this team after 2026, and there's already growing concern that one of Denver's most important defensive duos could be entering its final season together. At the same time, there's a young player quietly turning heads inside the organization, and some people believe he could become one of the biggest steals from the Broncos' entire draft class. The competition is heating up, roster spots are under pressure, and there are names on this defense fighting to prove they deserve a long-term future in Denver. But before we continue, make sure you hit that like button if you truly believe the Denver Broncos are building something special for the future. And I want to see the real optimistic fans in the comments right now. Comment this: Go Broncos! Our best days are coming. Now let's get straight into it. One of the biggest points discussed was the fact that Brandon Jones is entering the final year of his current contract, and at this moment there have been no reported negotiations regarding an extension. That immediately raises questions about the future of this defense because the chemistry between Jones and Hufanga became obvious very quickly last season. What stood out the most was how naturally they played together. There were moments where they appeared to communicate entire route concepts without even speaking. The discussion highlighted a game against the Chargers where both safeties were reacting to routes almost instinctively, waving each other off assignments because they already understood what the other player was seeing. That type of chemistry is rare, especially for a duo playing together for the first time. And Brandon Jones proved exactly why the Broncos believed in him when they brought him over from Miami. The Broncos took a gamble on him becoming a full-time starter after previously serving more as a rotational and spot-starting player with the Dolphins. But what Denver got was consistency, toughness, instincts, physicality, and a player capable of making game-changing plays on the football. The report described him as a ball hawk with elite instincts and strong ball skills. And when healthy, he became one of the most dependable players in the secondary. At the same time, Noah Hufanga brought a completely different edge to the defense. He was described as an enforcer and tone setter, the kind of player who changes the energy of the entire defense the second he steps onto the field. His physical style immediately gave the Broncos another layer of intensity. What's interesting is that Hufanga still has 2 years left on his contract, while Jones does not. That creates a major decision for the organization moving forward. And there's another important detail here that Broncos fans should not ignore. Brandon Jones currently has no guaranteed money remaining on his deal. The guaranteed structure was heavily front-loaded earlier in the contract, meaning this upcoming season becomes extremely important for both sides. Jones can earn additional money through incentives and snap counts, but the discussion suggested this could motivate him even more to seek long-term security. What makes this situation so fascinating is that the Broncos clearly value defensive continuity. The entire conversation repeatedly emphasized one central idea: if something is working this well, why break it apart? And the reality is, Denver still hasn't even seen the full potential of this pairing yet. That's the scary part. The Broncos never truly got to watch Brandon Jones and Noah Hufanga together during a playoff push the way they envisioned. There's still a feeling that the defense has another level it can reach with these two healthy and playing together for an entire season. Another huge point mentioned was turnovers. The belief internally seems to be that if the Broncos become one of the NFL's best takeaway defenses this season, Brandon Jones and Noah Hufanga will be the primary reason why. Their instincts, anticipation, communication, and aggression could become the catalyst for creating more interceptions and momentum-changing plays. And speaking of interceptions, another interesting note emerged during the discussion. It was announced that for every interception made by the Denver defense this season, $20,000 will be donated to Children's Hospital. That adds even more excitement surrounding a defense that already appears hungry to create more takeaways. But while the focus remains heavily on Jones and Hufanga, the Broncos also quietly have intriguing depth developing behind them. Devin Key became one of the biggest surprises discussed. He earned All-Pro recognition on special teams after setting a franchise record in tackles on special teams coverage. And late in the season, he began showing flashes defensively as well. The coaching staff clearly trusts him. There was even a statement shared that if Devin Key had to start at safety, there would be no concern whatsoever because of how smart and prepared he is. Then there's J.L. Skinner, who has continued earning praise for his special teams contributions despite battling through a torn labrum last season. Even though his defensive opportunities have remained limited, his toughness and effort continue standing out. And finally, there's rookie Miles Scott. This might be one of the most interesting under-the-radar developments in the entire safety room. The Broncos selected Scott in the 7th round, but there's growing belief that he could eventually challenge for a roster spot immediately because of his intelligence, versatility, and background as a former wide receiver turned safety. His understanding of route concepts, formations, and offensive tendencies was heavily praised, and there's already excitement about his long-term upside. The discussion even suggested that Denver may have landed a player capable of significantly outperforming his draft position in the future. The depth battle behind Brandon Jones and Talanoa Hufanga may quietly become one of the most intense competitions on the entire roster, and the Broncos coaching staff appears to understand that this room is going to shape not only the present of the defense, but potentially the future as well. Because while everyone is focused on the starting duo, there's another storyline developing underneath the surface that could seriously impact how this roster looks by the time the regular season arrives. And that storyline starts with Devin Key. What happened with Devin last season completely changed the perception of him inside this organization. Before, most people viewed him strictly as a special teams contributor. But after becoming an all-pro special teamer and setting a franchise record in special teams tackles, the Broncos started realizing they may have much more than just a core special teams player. Late in the season, when injuries forced adjustments, Devin Key stepped onto the field defensively and handled himself extremely well. There were moments mentioned where he entered games and immediately helped stabilize things, avoiding explosive plays, making tackles, and even getting past breakups. That matters, because one of the biggest themes throughout this entire discussion was trust. The Broncos coaching staff clearly trusts Devin Key. There was even a moment referenced where it was openly stated that if Devin Key had to start at safety on a Monday night game, there would be zero concern from the coaching staff. Think about how significant that statement is. Coaches do not casually say things like that about depth players unless they fully believe in their preparation and football intelligence. And according to the discussion, Devin has earned that trust through nonstop work behind the scenes. Even when he's not getting defensive snaps, he continues taking mental reps, studying formations, working after practice, and preparing like a starter. That type of player becomes incredibly valuable inside an NFL locker room. At the same time, J.L. Skinner remains one of the more fascinating names in this entire safety room. A lot of people expected him to eventually develop into a physical downhill defensive presence when he first arrived. But because Denver has maintained so much stability at the safety position over the years, those opportunities defensively simply haven't fully opened up for him yet. Still, what really stood out was the revelation that Skinner played through a torn labrum throughout last season after suffering the injury early in the year. That immediately tells you everything you need to know about the type of toughness he brings to the team. And despite the limited defensive snaps throughout his career so far, he continues carving out a role as one of the Broncos' most important special teams contributors. That's something the Broncos clearly value heavily. The discussion repeatedly emphasized how important special teams have become in today's NFL, especially with the modern kickoff